As a kid, I think my favorite Optimus Prime moment was when he gets that sick flaming blade sword hand thing in the middle of a fight in, I think, the first Transformers movie. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. But now I think it's in Transformers 1, where he comes back to the mining colony he used to work at and rallies his former coworkers and informs them of class consciousness. Also, something really cool I think kids need to learn. I honestly just really need people to see this movie. And I understand that's a dramatic word, need, but it's so good. This is the first Transformers movie I've seen that I think really captures just what I like about these characters and their dynamic. When I was younger and learned more of the lore, whatever iteration it was, that Optimus Prime was not only not always called Optimus Prime, but that he was a librarian of all things, someone who just wanted knowledge, was so interesting to me. This really came about to me in the Transformers Fall of Cybertron and War for Cybertron games, which are incredibly underappreciated, and we need a remaster of them. The idea was something like a robotic Captain America. Maybe pre-Soldier Serum, he didn't have all the fighting capabilities, but he knew what was wrong and right and needed to stand up for it. That's exactly the kind of Optimus Prime we get in this movie, even if it's not always what he is. There's a lot of risk taken in this movie. For one, having a younger, notably differently looking Optimus Prime and Megatron, or as they're called in the movie for majority of the runtime, Orion Pax and D16. But that's such a crucial moment in what we see of these Transformers movies and just in general stories, whether they be in comics, television series moving forward. This is such an important movie as to what happened on Cybertron, what Transformers were like before they got to Earth, and how their civilization worked. Something that's so fascinating we got a very brief glimpse at the beginning of the Bumblebee movie, but not nearly enough of. And I love that this whole movie takes place on Cybertron. Everything is a robot, everything whirs, chirps, clangs. There's a constant sound of metal as these characters are walking around, and it feels real. What I love about this movie is that it treats these characters with the respect they deserve. As much as I love him as Thor, I wasn't totally sold on Chris Hemsworth taking over the voice of Optimus Prime. I mean, Peter Cullen has been that voice for almost 40 years now. Actually, probably over that. But the point is, it's always been him. You hear Optimus Prime, you hear a certain voice. Obviously, this has changed in maybe certain games, shows, and now movies. But if you think of Optimus Prime, you think of him giving a big speech or saying something wise, and it just fits Peter Cullen's voice. For 90% of this movie, that's not what he does at all. In fact, this is a very young, almost apathetic Optimus Prime. I say almost because he clearly does care about Cybertron and its future, but not the way you expect. He's not this, we have to follow the rules and everything on Cybertron is fine and handy-dandy. That's not the Optimus in this movie at all, at first. In fact, they do something super interesting here. It's Megatron who is set on these rules and wants to be looked up to by Sentinel Prime. He worships him. He wants to uphold the values of Prime's past and do good for his community. And if anything, he's the rule follower, and Optimus is the kind of rebellious, rule-breaking Transformer. There's an ongoing bit about not following protocol or going against protocol. And I think that's a super interesting dynamic for the two main characters to have. That's what also sets this movie apart, is there's the greatest number of Transformers on screen and in action, but the main core cast is limited to Orion Pax, D16, Bumblebee, and Alita. Sure, Sentinel Prime and some other ones, some really cool appearances I won't spoil, but it's a very limited cast. And best part, there's no humans. I love the character Shia LaBeouf was playing, and, obviously that's a huge part of my childhood, is those movies, and Shia LaBeouf himself with his work on Even Stevens. But after those first three and they switched to Mark Wahlberg, it just really wasn't the same, and I didn't care about them anymore. We're 5 movies deep in these giant walking, talking, and fighting robots. I could care less what human is there. It's like the MonsterVerse problem in Godzilla movies, save for Godzilla -1, which did a fantastic job of actually making the audience care about the human characters. You don't have to worry about that with Transformers 1 because these robots are so human. Yeah, that was cheesy, but it's true. There's so many powerful moments and clear emotions that these, sentient beings experience that really breaks ground for what was done compared to past Transformers adaptations, where you'll see them talk or move their mouths, or maybe they'll kind of look off, but you see actual facial expressions here, which we don't get a lot of anymore. If it's not from the G1, the original cartoons, or the animated movie that first came out in 84. Please don't hate me if I'm wrong. Still haven't seen it. Definitely plan on. Brian Tyree Henry absolutely steals the show here as D16. Love that guy. He's fantastic as Aaron Davis in both Spider-Verse movies, and is going to kill it again whenever we get Across the Spider-Verse or Beyond the Spider-Verse. I don't know what it's going to be called. I think it's Beyond. It's Across the Spider-Verse Part 2. But he's such a good actor. And I don't say voice actor, and I don't just say actor. I say whatever he does, he really brings his all. He's a standout in both Godzilla vs. Kong movies. He's great here. He's one of my favorite parts of Eternals. Yes, I watched Eternals. The life he brings here to such a simplified villain is beyond interesting. There's something he does with his performance that makes him a character and not just the bad guy in that Saturday morning cartoon. That's also backed by the script, which I think deserves a lot of credit, and it's getting, but as the title of this video, really deserves more. There's definitely some one-liners or ongoing bits here I think they could have trimmed, but overall, the actual arcs that both main characters go through and the way that their dynamics bounce off each other as well as switch up is super interesting, whether you're a Transformers fan or not. I described this to one of my friends as Revenge of the Sith, but for Transformers. I don't want to talk too much about it, as it's not really a spoiler, as the trailers and posters are open about what this movie is doing and setting up. But there's just so many moments where you can see that at one point Optimus Prime and Megatron were not mortal enemies, but were the closest of friends. Dare I say even brothers. The things they go through, how long they've worked together, the adventures they go on, you see so much of that in here. And that's what makes it so heartbreaking with the knowledge of every Transformer story to come. This movie is a great prequel, it's a great spin-off, but it's just a great Transformers movie. You see a lot of similar story beats here, even some plot things that are relatively generic still have new life or are done in a very interesting way and have that technological flair to it because it is a Transformer story. Again, this is the first movie that takes place entirely on Cybertron. There's no Earth, there's no mention of Earth, they don't know what a human is. This could be thousands of years in the past. That's the cool thing you can do with Transformers before you send them to Earth. I can't overstate enough how crazy it is that this is the first Transformers movie since the very first one, where they were like, oh yeah, it takes place on Cybertron, here's Transformers, versus, hey, I'm Michael Bay, look at Megan Fox, look at this dirty joke, I do it for the kid. The only two people I have a minor complaint with are Scarlett Johansson, who I feel like really phones it in, but is still having a decent time, and Keegan-Michael Key is a really great Bumblebee. It's a very fun juxtaposition compared to what we've seen in the live-action movies where Bumblebee doesn't talk, or briefly does for glimpses, or the beginning of Bumblebee and whatnot. But it was so funny that they ran with someone who can do a character that just does not stop talking. And that really works here. I don't think he does a bad job. I think at times he is a little too much of just, oh, we got Keegan-Michael Key. But once again, you can tell he's having a lot of fun here. He's passionate about making people laugh, about really selling that comedic timing. There's a reason Key and Peele are as big as they are. Yeah, performances all around were pretty solid. Those were just a couple that, or kind of weren't as great for me, but are still more than passable. Like, for what they are, it's fine. It's just crazy because this movie stars Chris Hemsworth, Brian Tyree Henry, Scarlett Johansson, Keegan and Michael Key, and there's so little advertising for it. It's crazy. Even then you get some side characters, Steve Buscemi, Lawrence Fishburne, John Hamm. Like, there's some big names in this movie, but you're just not hearing anything about it, which is crazy to me. This brings me to an odd point, but bear with me. This is the time of year where we get a lot of quote-unquote sleeper movies, or before we get a lot of big horror movies, we get things that are just kind of thrown in. January, August, and September seem to be the prime month for movies that companies just don't think will do well and do so little advertising for. But there's almost always something that creeps through and is like, hey, this is really good, but no one really saw it, or not enough people talk about it. Prime example, 2016 is still one of my favorite animated movies, Kubo and the Two Strings. It has such high reviews, such high praise. It's become a cult classic. I have like 17 posters of it from when I worked in the movie theaters, and it was so good. And hardly anyone's seen it, so I make sure to tell people about that all the time. 2019, Ready or Not, another fantastic sleeper movie. It really is just a violent hide and seek, but it's just so fun to watch, and it's also become a cult classic. So in the 2020s, 2022, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is infamous for not doing well at the box office, but being still kind of within COVID. It had a lot of that lockdown thing of like, oh, do I go see a movie still? Maybe it's 2021. But also premiered on HBO Max the next day, the day of release. So there's always something, like I said, that just slips through the cracks. And while I don't think it'll be necessarily bad if Transformers 1 ends up being that kind of movie, it's just a shame because it's not a small franchise. This is Transformers. You hear Autobots roll out, you hear Bumblebee, you hear Optimus Prime, and it's like, yeah, I know that. Even if you don't regularly watch Transformers, they become a household name after becoming one of the biggest things ever in the early 80s. And they're still making shows, they're still making games, they're obviously still making the toys. So I just don't understand why Hasbro, of all people, would go, yeah, let's barely advertise this. I think I saw like 2 movies that had a trailer for Transformers 1. If I had better time management skills and did Trailer Talk Volume 2 when I wanted to, I was going to do a little bit about Transformers 1. And I think it's also just because the trailer really doesn't do it justice. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of generic things in there, some kind of like one-liners. But at the end of the day, these are still stories based on toys and aimed at kids. But again, that's what brings me back to saying the actual story in here is so riveting and fascinating that someone who's 10 could appreciate it, and someone who's freshly turned 25 is like, this is awesome. I literally leaned over to my buddy I watched it with tonight after seeing it, and I said, that was awesome. Because it was. I got chills like on and off throughout the last half hour of the movie, and that hasn't happened in so long. That's something that I think Deadpool and Wolverine, even like the hype movie of the year, give me like 1 or 2 like, oh yeah, moments. But no, for the whole last half hour of Transformers 1, I was locked in. It's just such a fun movie. It's right under 2 hours, but it flies by and has like pitch perfect pacing. Like it's always very quick, sometimes almost too quick, but gives you enough to breathe. And it's very refreshing to watch a movie that when it's serious. Not, oh, we're going to undercut this with a Joker one-liner. Yeah, they're in there, but they're at well-placed moments. Because when this movie is serious, it's serious. There's a moment towards the end that made my jaw drop, and my entire auditorium went silent. Like, everyone else was on the same page of like, oh, they're actually doing this. Okay, wow. And you don't get that kind of feeling anymore, man. Like, this is one of like 3 movies this year that's released where I'm this excited. I watched this movie today. I'm doing this off the cuff stream of consciousness because I want to get the word out now. Even if you see it on a $5 Tuesday, even if you're not a diehard fan of Transformers, please give this movie a shot. At the very least, you get something fun. You get an animated movie with some crazy cool action, a great score, and like an awesome blend of these like 80s retro, like neon visuals, but it looks like how when you would like play with Transformers as a kid, what it looks like someone pulled that straight out of your mind. But it's cool. It's so cool. This is probably my most unfocused review to date, but I needed to get it out. If anyone sees this, I really hope that guy on Twitter who's single-handedly promoting this movie sees this. He's doing the Lord's work, or in this case, Primus work, because yeah, this movie deserves all the attention. It deserves all the, I don't want to say box office. I mean, it does deserve to succeed because this is one where it's like, oh, this movie deserves a sequel. This isn't a Despicable Me movie where it was like, oh yeah, that was cute, and then it makes like $1 billion and no one really talks about it afterwards. It's like, this doesn't deserve to go unnoticed. People worked hard on this movie. This was made by people. This wasn't a studio exec movie. This wasn't just hitting a checklist. This was something made with passion, and I really, really want it to be seen for that. So, all in all, super good time. Great action, great story, very emotional, and just so entertaining. Like, a lot of movies lately, I'll start to like mentally be like, oh, like how am I processing that? But this just has, like I said, that rapid pacing, that perfect balance between seriousness and being lighthearted, and not dumbing down really high-end concepts like fascism for kids, but is like, oh, anyone can look at this and understand this, Like, if people are using Zootopia to explain racism and prejudice to their kids, totally valid, by the way, please use Transformers 1 to explain class consciousness, workers' rights, and all that good stuff to your kids. And yes, I'm being dead serious. I think this is a great way to introduce kids to that concept. Optimus Prime outright says, till all are one. That's one of his big sayings, and it's true. And that's a general idea I think everyone can get behind. So, anyways, 9 out of 10. Really good time. Can't wait to see it again whenever I do. Gonna cop it on DVD when it comes out. Please, please, please go see this movie. I want more movies like this. And despite the box office numbers, critics and audiences agree. So, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. Comment below what your favorite Transformers movie is, moment. If you have a favorite Transformer, do you collect Transformers action figures? I'd love to see it. This is one of those things that I only know so much about, but have just a strange affinity for. I know there's loads of Transformers comics, and I can't wait to get them. I'm also running out of room for the current comics I have, but I'm willing to make room. So, thank you again so much for watching, and just please go see Transformers 1.